Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down story foundations and why every empire begins with a single moment of honesty.
Thank you. It is really good to be here today. We have a very specific dossier to analyze for this session. It deals with the structural integrity of personal narratives and specifically the pivot point between a stagnant career and the launch of a new enterprise.
Yeah, I want to get straight into the text we are looking at today, which is titled The Architecture of Recognition. But before we parse the specific language in the dossier, I kind of want to challenge the premise right out of the gate. We were talking about story foundations and, empires, which sounds very grand. But in reality, for most people listening, we are really just talking about quitting a job they hate or maybe fixing a business that is bleeding cash.
Right, correct.
The cultural narrative around this, like the movie version of this, is always explosive. It is the Big Bang. The scene, the protagonist gets fed up. They sweep the papers off the decks, tell the boss where to shove it, grab the goldfish, and just storm out to a slow clap from the office. It is very dramatic. It is visible.
It is also, from a purely strategic standpoint, a complete disaster.
See, that is exactly what I want to unpack here.
Yeah.
Because it feels good, right? It feels like action. But looking at the source material we have today, that Big Bang isn't where the story actually starts, is it?
No, it is not. If you are relying on a Big Bang exit, you haven't really built a strategy. You have just triggered an explosion. That isn't architecture. I mean, that is demolition. The Big Bang creates a vacuum. You leave, but you have absolutely nowhere to go. What this dossier suggests and what we need to really dissect today is that the true beginning of any significant pivot is invisible. It happens in the quiet. It is what the text specifically refers to as the architecture of recognition.
Architecture of recognition is a weighty phrase. Break that down for me. Why use the word architecture?
Think about a skyscraper. Before you ever see steel rising above the skyline, there is a massive amount of work happening underground. They are testing the soil. They are pouring the foundation. If you try to build a new life or new business on a foundation of denial, essentially on a swamp, it will collapse. Recognition is the soil testing. It is the active process of looking at the ground you are standing on and admitting, hey, this is unstable.
So the action isn't the resignation letter. The action is actually the realization.
Precisely. The realization is the structural shift. The resignation letter is just the paperwork that follows months later.
Let's look at the core thesis presented in the dossier, because it attacks a very specific behavior that I think we're all guilty of. There's a quote here I want to read. Your story begins the moment you stop waiting to feel ready and start telling the truth that has already shaped you.
There are two distinct mechanisms at play in that sentence. The first is that trap of waiting to feel ready.
I want to push on that a bit, because in business, we are literally taught to be ready. You don't launch a product until it is ready. You don't sign a commercial lease until you have the capital. Isn't waiting to be ready just, being responsible?
In a logistical sense, yes, absolutely. You need capital. You need a plan. But the text isn't talking about logistics here. It is talking about the emotional state of readiness, that elusive feeling of, okay, now I'm safe to jump. That feeling is a complete mirage.
Because you never actually feel safe.
Because the metrics for emotional readiness are impossible to satisfy. We constantly move the goalposts on ourselves. First, it is, I need $10,000 in savings. Then you get the $10,000 and suddenly the brain says, actually, for inflation, we need $20,000. Then it is, well, I need to wait until after the holidays. Then I need to wait until this big project is done.
It's stalling.
It is a highly sophisticated stalling tactic masquerading as prudence. In a consulting context, we call this analysis paralysis. You are overanalyzing the data to delay the execution because the execution is terrifying. The internal consultant's view here is that if you are waiting to feel ready to dismantle a life that isn't working, you're basically negotiating with a ghost. The data says you are unhappy. The data says the model is broken. Waiting for a feeling doesn't change the data.
So if we strip away the waiting, we're left with the second half of that sentence. Start telling the truth that has already shaped you. That phrasing trips me up a little bit. Already shaped you.
It is the most critical part of the diagnosis. Note the tense there. Past tense. The change has already happened.
Give me an example of what that actually looks like practically.
Imagine a relationship that has gone cold. You are still living together. You are still having dinner every night. But emotionally, the bond snapped 6 months ago. The relationship has already been shaped by that break. You just haven't admitted it yet. The truth isn't something you need to go out and find. It is something you are currently actively suppressing.
So the damage to the old life is already done.
The structural integrity is entirely compromised. The pivot isn't about doing something new yet. It is about admitting that the old machinery is obsolete.
It is interesting because usually when we hear the word honesty, we think of it as a moral virtue.
Yeah.
Don't tell lies because it is wrong. But looking at this analysis, it seems like the text is treating honesty as a structural necessity, like a hard engineering requirement.
That is exactly how we must view it in this context. Honesty here is not about morality, it is about accuracy. If you are the CEO of a company and your main product line is losing 20% year over year, but you refuse to admit it because you designed that product and you have a personal attachment to it, you will go bankrupt.
You are operating on bad maps.
You are operating on pure fantasy. You cannot fix what you will not acknowledge. The source material argues that the exact same rule applies to your career trajectory. If you hate your job, but you keep telling yourself, oh, it is not that bad, I am just tired, it will get better next quarter. You are feeding bad data into your own strategic planning algorithm. Honesty is the bedrock. Without that absolute, unvarnished reality of your situation, any action you take, even quitting, is completely unstable.
It is like trying to use a GPS when you refuse to input your current location. You can type in freedom as the destination all you want, but if the GPS thinks you are in New York and you are actually in Chicago, the directions are going to be useless.
Exactly right. You cannot plot a course to a new destination if you are lying about your starting coordinates. And most people lie about their starting coordinates because admitting where they are is just too painful.
I want to move us into the forensic analysis of the specific scenario provided in the text. It is a micro-story, really, but it is packed with data points. The subject is sitting in a parked car outside their office.
It is a classic tableau of the modern workforce, the parking lot purgatory.
Right, but look at the specific detail here. The text says, the engine's still running.
That is a fascinating detail for the author to include. Let's look at that through a physics lens. What exactly is an idling engine?
It is noise. It is vibration.
It is a machine that is converting potential energy, the fuel, into heat and noise, but achieving zero displacement. It is burning resources to remain completely stationary.
Wow. Okay, that hits home. That is a perfect mirror for the subject's career state, isn't it?
It is a one-to-one correlation. The subject is in the car, burning their own internal fuel. The cortisol, their emotional bandwidth, their creative energy. All of it just to stay in one spot. They aren't moving forward, they are just vibrating in place. That is the definition of idling in a career context.
I think a lot of listeners will identify with that feeling of being completely exhausted at 9 in the morning. You haven't even done anything yet, but you are just drained.
You are tired because the engine has been redlining in neutral. You are fighting the heavy friction of your own resistance.
That paints such a vivid picture. And then we have the somatic markers, the physical symptoms. The text says, I noticed the way my hands rested on the steering wheel. Tense but steady.
Tense but steady. There is a duality there that we absolutely need to unpack. This isn't just a throwaway descriptive line. It is a medical readout.
Let's start with tense. Why are the hands tense if he's just sitting there in park?
Tension is the body's early warning system. We often like to think the brain figures things out first, that we have a logical thought like, I dislike this job, and then the body reacts. But biologically, the body usually knows the truth weeks, months, or even years before the prefrontal cortex is willing to admit it. The tension in the hands is a literal fight-or-flight response. The reptilian brain is screaming, we are about to enter a highly hostile environment.
The office is the predator.
The office is the threat. The body is bracing for physical impact.
But then there is the word steady. That completely contradicts the tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Usually, if you are in fight or flight, you are shaking or jittery.
That is the variable that changes everything. Why steady? Steady implies resolve. It implies that at a deep subconscious level, the final decision has already been made. The subject isn't wavering anymore. They aren't debating, should I go in? Should I call in sick? They are steeling themselves to go in one last time.
The text goes on to say, they were holding a truth I had avoided saying out loud.
Consider the powerful metaphor of holding there. The steering wheel is the only thing in that exact moment that the subject feels they can control. The office, completely out of control. The career path, out of control. But the wheel? They have a firm grip on that. The car becomes a containment vessel for the truth.
It is like a pressure cooker. The car is the only safe space left between the domestic life they just left and the professional life they are about to enter. It is the airlock.
Precisely. It is a decompression chamber. And in that airlock, the internal pressure is equalizing. The truth they are holding, that realization of, I cannot do this anymore, is a highly volatile substance. If they let it out inside the office, it blows up the career immediately. If they let it out at home, it might disrupt the family dynamic before they have a viable plan. So they hold it in the car.
But pressure vessels have structural limits. You cannot hold it forever.
No, you cannot. The structural integrity of the container is failing. That is exactly what the scene represents. It is the moment the containment vessel can no longer hold the pressure. The leak is beginning.
Let's diagnose the environment that is creating this pressure. Because it's not just a generic "I hate work" complaint. The text lists some very specific stressors. Fluorescent lights, endless tasks. And this phrase, which really stuck out to me, the feeling of being slightly out of place inside my own days.
That phrase is the diagnostic key. Slightly out of place.
It sounds mild, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a massive crisis. It sounds more like a minor annoyance.
And that is exactly why it is so dangerous. If your office was on fire or if your boss was physically throwing things at you, the signal would be crystal clear. You would leave immediately. But slightly out of place. That is insidious. It is a subtle misalignment.
It is easy to ignore day to day.
It is very easy to rationalize. But think of it structurally again. Think of a gear in a high-speed machine that is off axis by just a fraction of a millimeter. The machine still runs, it still produces output. But there's constant friction, there is heat. Eventually, that friction grinds the gear down to metal filings.
So slightly out of place is a cumulative injury.
It is a repetitive stress injury to the soul.
The text mentions fluorescent lights as well.
Yeah.
That feels like such a universal symbol for the sterile, artificial nature of the corporate environment.
It represents an environment that is deeply hostile to organic growth. Nothing grows under fluorescent lights except headaches and eye strain. But going back to that feeling of being out of place, this is pure cognitive dissonance. You are performing a role, you are playing the good employee, the reliable manager, but your internal self has shifted entirely.
So it is like acting. You are on stage, saying the lines perfectly, but you absolutely hate the play.
And acting is exhausting. It consumes a tremendous amount of metabolic energy to pretend to be someone you are not for 8 to 10 hours a day. Imagine wearing a suit that is tailored for someone 3 inches shorter and 50 pounds lighter than you. Can you physically walk in it?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you sit in a board meeting? Yes.
But you are constantly pulling at the collar. You feel constricted everywhere.
Every single movement requires unnecessary effort. You are constantly fighting the fabric itself. That is the heaviness the text refers to later. It isn't gravity weighing you down. It is the drag coefficient of living a lie.
The source material articulates the shift beautifully, actually. It says, I wanted something different, something that felt like an extension of who I was becoming instead of who I once had to be.
Who I once had to be. That is a very compassionate distinction.
What do you mean by compassionate?
It implies that the past self wasn't wrong or foolish. It implies survival. We shouldn't look back at our earlier career choices with shame. The past self took that job to pay the bills, to gain necessary experience, to survive a recession. That was a highly necessary adaptation. The suit fit perfectly back then.
But the emerging self has grown.
Correct. The organism has outgrown the shell. This is the core of the internal tremor. It is the intense friction between the past self, who primarily wants safety, and the emerging self, who demands expansion.
And here is the major internal consultant takeaway for you as a listener today. You cannot build a future business on the infrastructure of your past self.
No, it is impossible. If you try to launch a new venture while still operating under the psychological rules of your old job, seeking permission, waiting for clear instructions, avoiding all risk, you will fail. You have to update the operating system. You cannot run next-generation software on vintage hardware.
That transition is tricky, though. It is not an instant upgrade. The dossier mentions a memory surfacing. The subject remembers admitting to a friend years earlier that they secretly wanted to build a business.
This is critical forensic evidence that the desire isn't just a sudden, impulsive whim. It is a documented historical pattern.
The text says, at the time it felt like a wish. Now it felt like a calling. I feel like we use those two words interchangeably all the time, but the text treats them as polar opposites.
Because they're structurally different. A wish is entirely passive. It is a fantasy. I wish I could fly. I wish I won the lottery. It requires zero agency from you. It is something that magically happens to you. It is a safe thought because you don't actually have to do anything about it.
Okay.
A calling is imperative. It is active. It demands a response from you. In classical Greek tragedy, they call it the agon. It is the central conflict that drives the action forward. When a wish calcifies into a calling, it transforms from a pleasant daydream into a strict directive. It moves from, "it would be nice if," to, "I absolutely must."
So the internal tremor isn't a new phenomenon at all. It has been there the whole time.
It has been heavily suppressed. Think of it like geological pressure. The tectonic plates have been pushing against each other for years, the deep desire for freedom pushing against the immediate need for security. The tremor is just the moment the ground finally slips.
The source mentions that these moments of realization often happen in what it calls the quiet pause. A sigh in the car. A stray thought in the shower. A whisper you keep hearing in your own head. Why is it always the shower or the car? Why doesn't this happen in the middle of a Tuesday staff meeting?
Because the meeting is specifically designed to suppress that signal. We live in an economy of total attention extraction. Emails, Slack messages, podcasts, billboards. The 9 to 5 environment is perfectly designed to keep your mental processor fully loaded so you physically cannot run any background diagnostics.
That makes a lot of sense. If I am busy answering 80 emails an hour, I don't have the cognitive bandwidth to question why I'm answering them in the first place.
Exactly. The sheer noise of the operational grind drowns out all strategic clarity. But in the shower, in the car on the drive home, the external noise suddenly drops. The input signal hits near zero. And suddenly, the internal signal, that quiet whisper, becomes unavoidable and audible.
It is the signal-to-noise ratio.
Correct. When the noise drops, the signal spikes. And most people, when they clearly hear that whisper,
They panic. They immediately turn up the radio. They start scrolling Instagram.
they flood the channel with noise again as fast as possible because the whisper is deeply threatening to the status quo. The whisper is plainly saying, this system isn't working.
From a consultant's perspective, actively ignoring that signal is negligence, isn't it?
It is gross negligence. Imagine you are running a massive manufacturing plant. A huge generator in the corner suddenly starts vibrating. It starts making a low, humming noise that definitely isn't in the spec sheet. The concrete floor is shaking a little bit. What do?
You hit the emergency stop button. You clear the floor.
Okay.
You inspect the machine.
Right. You assume a critical component is about to break. You diagnose the anomaly immediately. You certainly don't say, well, let's just turn up the factory music so we can't hear the vibration anymore.
But that is exactly what we do with our own lives and careers.
We feel the anxiety, the dread, the tremor, and we immediately medicate it. We distract ourselves. We push the broken machine even harder. The source text here is arguing strongly for the inspection. It is saying, listen to the tremor. The tremor is valuable data.
So let's say we listen. We hear the tremor. We admit the truth. The next step is where most people get it completely wrong. We talked about the Big Bang myth earlier. But the source material gives very specific, very different instructions for this tactical pivot.
Yes. The text reads, I did not leap that morning. I did not quit. I simply acknowledged the truth.
I did not quit. That is the headline for me. Because the natural instinct when you finally realize you are trapped in a cage is to just run as fast as you can.
The instinct is rage quitting. It feels incredibly good in the moment. It provides a massive dopamine hit of pure agency. I am taking control. I am the captain now. But almost universally, it is followed by a crushing crash of panic because you have just destroyed your cash flow without building a bridge to the new revenue stream.
So acknowledgement is the strategic alternative to just blowing up your life.
Acknowledgement is surgical. It changes the internal psychological landscape without immediately destroying your external financial safety net. It is a decoupling mechanism.
Decoupling. Explain how that works.
Before you acknowledge the truth, you are emotionally fused with your job. Your entire identity is tied to it. When the boss is unhappy, you are crushed. When a project fails, you feel like a personal failure. You are enmeshed in the system.
But once you admit to yourself, I am leaving this place, even if you haven't told a single soul yet.
You decouple. You are now an undercover agent. You are a spy in your own life.
I love that image. The spy.
Think about the mindset of a spy behind enemy lines. They are in the building, they are doing the work, they are smiling at the enemy, but their true loyalty is elsewhere. The boss yelling, that is just intel now. The bad coffee. It is temporary. The stupid corporate policy. It is just an obstacle to navigate around. You have radically shifted from being a victim of the environment to an objective observer of the environment.
That is a massive power shift. You literally stop taking it personally.
It changes everything. The text says the foundation of any new chapter is the moment you start pretending the old one still fits.
It is the pretending that slowly kills us.
Pretending is an active, massive energy drain. It costs real calories to wear the mask every day. When you stop pretending, at least to yourself, you liberate all that trapped energy. Now, instead of using that energy to maintain the facade, you can use it to meticulously plan the exit. You can use it to build the side hustle. You can use it to learn the new required skills.
So the pivot isn't the day you dramatically walk out the door. The pivot is the day you stop lying to yourself.
Correct. The physical exit is just the lagging indicator. The strategic pivot actually happened in the car. The business of you incorporated changed direction the exact moment you admitted the truth.
I want to circle back to the diagnostics for a moment. We talked about the tremor, but there is another key metric mentioned in the text: the heaviness. Specifically, it mentions the heaviness in your chest on Monday mornings.
The Sunday scary is on absolute steroids.
Yeah. But the text treats this heaviness not as a passing mood, but as a hard data point.
It is a physiological rejection of the environment. Let's use a biological analogy here. If you ate a specific food, let's say shellfish, and every single time you ate it, your throat closed up and your stomach violently cramped, what would you naturally conclude?
That I am allergic to it.
Yeah.
That it is literally toxic to my system.
Exactly. You wouldn't sit there and say, well, I just need to have a better attitude about this shrimp. You wouldn't say, if I was a stronger, more resilient person, I wouldn't have anaphylactic shock. You would simply stop eating the shrimp.
But with work, we blame ourselves for the reaction.
We do. We internalize the toxicity. The heaviness on Monday morning is your physical body rejecting the ecosystem of your job. It is a toxicity reading. It is your immune system desperately trying to expel the career.
The source material also uses this very powerful metaphor of the cage. It says, you notice how the work you once tolerated now feels like a cage.
Let's discuss the whole concept of tolerance. Tolerance is so often praised as a high virtue in the corporate workplace. High tolerance for ambiguity, high tolerance for stress. It is worn as a badge of honor by top performers.
It is on every single job description. Must work well under pressure.
But physically and psychologically, tolerance is a strictly finite resource. It is a battery. You can tolerate a bad commute, a toxic boss, or mind-numbing work for a certain amount of time. But you are actively spending your tolerance credits every single day.
And eventually, the account hits zero.
And when it hits zero, the environment fundamentally shifts. It goes from being a job, which is just an exchange of time for money, to a cage, which is a restriction of freedom. The physical walls haven't moved. The fluorescent lights haven't changed. You have changed. Your tolerance account is completely overdrawn.
And once it feels like a cage, you really cannot unfeel it.
No. Once you clearly see the bars, you cannot pretend they are just decorative molding. This is exactly why the internal consultant's advice here is so incredibly stark. Do not ignore physical symptoms of professional misalignment. If your chest is heavy every Monday, that is a strategic indicator that your current business model, which is selling your time to this specific employer, is failing. It is a distressed asset. You need to prepare to divest.
So we have the diagnosis, we have the internal acknowledgement, we have adopted the spy mindset. Now, how do we actually operationalize this? Because having insights is great, but without tactical action, they are just daydreams. The source material gives a very specific call to action.
It moves you from gathering insight to logging data.
The instruction is clear. Capture the moment when you first realized you wanted more. Write it down.
This sounds overly simple, perhaps even trivial to some of the high performers listening right now. They might think, write in a journal. I'm trying to build an empire here and not keep a diary, but you absolutely cannot underestimate this critical step.
Why does writing it down matter so much operationally? Is it just about remembering it later?
It is about cognitive offloading and solidification. Unwritten thoughts are basically a gas. They are vapor. They expand, they contract, they dissipate entirely. You can have a brilliant, life-changing realization in the shower, and by the time you dry off and check your phone, it is gone. Writing solidifies the abstract. It turns the gas into a solid state.
It makes it real.
It makes it undeniable. When you write down the words, I am done with this job, or I'm going to start my own design firm, you are moving that specific thought from the whisper category straight into the official record category. You are creating an undeniable paper trail for your own life.
It is the first official document of the new enterprise.
It is the articles of incorporation for your new life trajectory. Even if it is just scribbled on a yellow sticky note, it is proof of concept.
But the text is very specific. It doesn't just say, write down your feelings. It says, start by naming the moment where everything quietly began to shift.
Naming is a very old, very potent form of power. In ancient folklore, if you know the true name of the demon, you can control it. In modern business strategy, if you can accurately name the problem, you can solve it. By naming the moment, writing down, it was Tuesday, October 4th, sitting in the Honda Civic, you take immediate power over that vague, cloudy feeling of dissatisfaction. You isolate the variable.
It stops being this cloud of, I am just generally unhappy with my life, and it sharpens into this specific situation is no longer tenable for me.
Correct. You draw a hard circle around the event. That gives you analytical distance. It allows you to study the situation rather than just drown in the emotion of it.
And that leads perfectly to the final point of the analysis here. When you acknowledge that moment, you take ownership of your narrative.
Ownership, that is the ultimate goal of this entire architecture.
Talk to me about that shift. It is a shift from what to what exactly?
Think about the structural hierarchy of any story. There are characters and there are authors. Characters merely react to the plot. Things happen to them. The boss yells, they get sad. The market crashes, they get scared. If you are just constantly reacting to your environment, you are playing the role of a character. You are an employee inside someone else's story.
And the author.
The author creates the plot. The author decides where the story goes next. Acknowledging the truth promotes you instantly to author. It makes you the CEO of the narrative. You might still physically be in the car. You might still have to walk into that office every day for another 6 months to build up cash reserves. But you are no longer a victim of the circumstance. You are a strategist executing a highly phased withdrawal.
That is a fundamental shift in posture. You are not retreating from the enemy, you are flanking them.
Precisely. You are maneuvering with intent.
I absolutely love that. Okay, let's recap the strategy here for you listening, because we have covered a massive amount of ground today. 1. The Big Bang exit is a total myth. Do not wait for the movie moment to dramatically quit. 2. Readiness is a trap. The true start is the internal truth, not the external action. 3. Listen to the somatics. The tension in your hands, the heaviness in your chest. That is your internal consultant giving you hard data. 4. Acknowledge the truth to stop the energy leak. Stop pretending it fits. Adopt the spy mindset. 5. Write it down. Name the moment. Operationalize the insight.
That is the complete dossier. It is a surgical, calculated approach to changing your life. It completely rejects the drama in favor of the data.
And it all starts in that quiet moment. The car engine idling in the lot. The deep breath before opening the door.
The silent realization that the suit simply no longer fits.
Exactly. But before we wrap up today, I want to ask you one last thing. We have talked extensively about the fear of leaving, the fear of the unknown. But when you look at this entire architecture of recognition, what is the actual alternative?
I would add one final critical thought for you to mull over. We talk about the fear of failure constantly in business. What if I leave the secure job and I fail? But looking at this architecture, I think the real fear isn't that you will fail if you leave. The real fear, the one that actually causes that deep internal tremor, is the realization that you will succeed at staying.
Whoa. Play that out for me. Succeed at staying.
The true terror isn't leaving and falling flat on your face. The true terror is waking up in 5 years, sitting in that exact same car with the exact same engine idling, realizing you successfully maintained a life you deeply didn't want, realizing you kept the mask on perfectly, that you successfully tolerated the cage. That is the outcome you should actually be terrified of.
It's completely chilling and incredibly motivating at the same time. Puts the risk in proper perspective. The risk isn't moving. The risk is staying.
Precisely. The ultimate risk is stagnation.
If you're ready to turn your moment of truth into a story that leads you forward, visit 365 Freedom online. This has been a 365 Freedom Strategy Session.